No Small Endeavor is brought to you by Progressive. Most of you aren't just listening right now. You're driving, cleaning, and even exercising. But what if you could be saving money by switching to Progressive? Drivers who save by switching save nearly $750 on average, and auto customers qualify for an average of 7 discounts. Multitask right now. Quote today at Progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. National average 12-month savings of $744 by new customers surveyed who saved with Progressive between June 2022 and May 2023. Potential savings will vary. Discounts not available in all states and situations. Hello, friends. I'm Lee C. Camp. You're listening to No Small Endeavor. This is our unabridged interview with Reverend James Lawson. Reverend Lawson was considered one of the architects of the civil rights movement. I had long known of his work as a rookie faculty member years ago. Decades ago now, I first met him in Nashville and was taken by his work and his stories. And for years then, I wanted to sit down and have the opportunity to interview him about his life and about his life's work. Then on my sabbatical a couple of years ago, I decided I'd take a shot at trying to see if I could have the opportunity to sit down with him at some length. And that opportunity worked out. I made my way out to Southern California, and on a Sunday, beautiful Sunday in Los Angeles in late January, I made my way to the church where he pastored for many years near the end of his career, and met him, and we sat in the church parlor and talked for several hours. It was truly a delight and one of the great experiences of my own life, getting to listen to Reverend Lawson. This is a moving and beautiful interview, I think, and we're sorry to report that he passed away this past week at the age of 95. May he rest in peace. Enjoy. Reverend James Lawson is a Methodist minister, seen by many as the teacher of many of the American civil rights activists, the very conscience of the movement itself. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. once called him the leading theorist and strategist of nonviolence in the world. He was born the grandson and son of Methodist ministers. Reverend Lawson served 14 months in prison as a conscientious objector to the Korean conflict. After gaining parole, he served as a missionary in India, and then back in the States when Dr. King met Lawson in 1955, he pleaded with him to come to the South. Lawson would respond to King's call and begin a lifetime's work of participation in the civil rights movement, as well as serving Holman United Methodist Church in Los Angeles for 25 years, where we sit today in the parlor of the church. Reverend Lawson, it's an honor to be with you today.
Why, thank you. I'm pleased.
I once heard you, I think, in Nashville, speak of the influence that your mother had on forming your thinking about nonviolence early on. Do I remember that correctly?
Yes, you did.
Yeah. What did that look like for you?
Well, when I was 4 years old, my father was appointed to the St. James AME Zion Church in Massillon, Ohio. It is in that congregation that I clearly felt, along with my parents and my older sisters, that who I was and that what my life was about. And as I've looked back, it was 4 years old when I sensed the call of God. And so how do I put this? There are 2 or 3 ways. One experience of my mother is that Dad thought that his sons should learn boxing and fighting, and not necessarily formally, but in the street. So when we were accosted by guys at a very early age as the preacher's kid, therefore an anomaly of some kind, my mother insisted don't fight. Dad said, no, go ahead and fight him. And so at age 4, tried to fight a 4-year-old white neighbor boy who suddenly started spitting at me racist words. My mother and father never knew about that because I never told them about it. But in family conversation, my dad's position was that we had to defend ourselves, and my mother's position was, no, Jacob, they can do it another way. And I heard such conversations probably before I started school at age 5, at least once or twice. I'm not sure how many times. But the whole family would be gathered around the supper table, for example, getting ready for supper, and where there was a lot of talk, table talk of all kinds, and that would come up. So that table talk was in our house before I started school.
And then did your mother once confront you after a fight you had later?
Yes, I am sure that my sisters and brothers and I all agreed, though I do not remember a single conversation with any of them. That is, we would not permit anyone to hurl racist remarks at us on the street or in the playground or school. Now, the interesting thing is that I never had that happen in school in all 12 years of public schools in Massillon. It never happened once to my knowledge, neither at recess or going or coming to school. No time. That still bewilders me. That happened mostly on the street, especially, however, it happened in the public parks, in which there was 2 very big ones, one at the west end of town and one at the east end of the city, where we all went to play. So it was a beautiful spring day. Sun shining, just wonderful Ohio spring day. And I literally ran home from the 4th grade, which was only about a 3-block run, but I ran it. And through 2 very long driveways that were alleys, covering a whole block, into the backyard at home and into the back kitchen door. And my mother said, "Jimmy, I have a errand for you," because I was the errand boy very often for my mother and father. And so she gave me whatever it was I was to do. I ran out the back kitchen door and back the way I'd going to school and up, I think, 1st Avenue to Main Street. And as I turned left onto Main Street on this bright, beautiful day, there was a car parked immediately close to the corner. And the windows wide open, and a youngster, I think it was a boy, but I don't remember, was in the front seat. And as I turned the corner, just in front of the car, he stood up in the seat and put his whole shoulders outside the window and yelled at me a racist epithet. And I simply went over to him and smacked him and went about my business. When I came back the same route going home, the car was gone. But I ran on back home. And as I reported to my mother about the errand I had run, I, for some reason, then sat in a favorite chair by the back door in the kitchen while she was hunched over the stove cooking supper, no doubt, to my left. And I talked to her about my day, and one of the things I reported was my hitting this child in the car. And my mother, without turning towards me at all to talk, kept talking to her in her normal voice. And the first thing she said to me as I related this incident was, Jimmy, what good did that do? And then she went into what I later call a long soliloquy on who we were, what we were about as a family, and about our worship of God and our participation in the St. James AME Zion congregation, and our religion and Jesus, and how that meant we could not be injured by this misbehavior of being called something racist. And she ended up by saying, finishing her soliloquy by saying, there must be a better way. That incident was a continuously transforming incident for me. It became a numinous experience for me because I heard a voice which came from what it seemed to me a deep place in space, and then gradually I felt that it was coming from inside me, but from outside me, but it was coming to me, and it was a voice deep within. And that voice said, number one, you will never again fight anybody physically. And what was most important in that conversation then was that you'll never fight on the playground anymore, or playing tackle football or basketball or any other sport, because we were all deep into sports. And I heard her voice continuing as that issue came to me. And then secondly, as she was talking, I heard the same voice saying, and you will find the better way. Now, this is 4th grade. And so from then on, I never slapped or threw my fist at somebody or tackled anybody in anger over any kind of an epithet, and not over a racist epithet. So I see that as a numinous experience. And towards the end of her soliloquy, I heard the voice saying, and you will find a better way. So actually, my understanding of nonviolence began at least there.
So then in your college days, I understand you began to read Gandhi, Tolstoy, and you're also grappling with the question of nonviolence and thinking about Scripture and thinking about your faith.
Well, some of the scriptures that had worked out well. I already recognized that Jesus was not somebody condoning violence of any kind or hatred of any kind, because I was reading the Bible and before school even, and I was already of the mind that Jesus was my guide and leader, and that Jesus essentially did not practice hatred of any kind. It is in my first year in college in 1947 that the history department, and every freshman had to take a history course, history department brought in A.J. Musty, the executive director of the FOR, for a lecture. And Musty did talk about pacifism and nonviolence and Gandhi. And he's the one, therefore, that introduced me clearly to the Gandhi. And I went to the library and began to read every book I could find on Gandhi.
And then you're also, during this time, if I remember correctly, trying to discern what you would do in the face of the draft. And maybe are you talking to your local draft board?
Yes, we had our Selective Service Act required every 18-year-old boy to register. So I registered that September, but put on in the margins, in the four margins, I indicated that I didn't know if I was doing the right thing, that I was shaping and forming my life around the call of God in Jesus, and that I hadn't really made up my mind where that process wanted me to operate. So I was registering, but could not know what direction the prayer life and the meditation and the reading would take me.
Yeah. And then you get a summons. The Korean conflict begins, and you get a summons to appear?
No, that's not what happened. 47, I enter college. I've registered. And then I sent my draft cards back. Somewhere between probably 48. I have come to the conclusion that, like Jim Crow law, which I've refused to obey, Selective Service law was the second unjust law, which I could not obey. It wasn't a CO position. I could have taken a CO position because the draft permitted me to. The Selective Service also, this Selective Service Act, and this is not in this books, the Selective Service Act was unfair in my mind because it gave me 3 exemptions. It gave me a student exemption. It gave me a pre-ministerial exemption. Pre-ministerial students were not to be drafted. And it gave me a conscientious objection exemption. Had I could have taken any one of those 3. And when in BW, I had a very good friend. In fact, he and I became roommates at one point, who was a pre-ministerial student and also a Methodist. His draft board sent him a CO, a student exemption, and a CO exemption. So he never had to bother, and he didn't send it back. But my board proceeded to prosecute me as soon as the Korean War began. Then, in June of 1952, I got draft summons and was arrested in the fall of 51. No, it was 51. And in the fall of 51 was arrested. No, I'm sorry. In 50, the war began in 50. And I got a draft notice then, for which I was arrested in 51, and a trial in, the war began June of 50. I was arrested in the fall of 50. And because the FBI man who came to me initially knew who I was, he had come to me while in college because my friends Jim Cox and Bob Farkas, and my friend Chuck Soner from high school, my classmate and debate partner in high school, all applied for CO status.
Huh.
So the FBI came to me first for Chuck, and we walked on. I think that interview took place partially in Massillon, partially at BW. And then the interviews for Jim Cox and Bob Farkas all took place on campus. And I walked the campus with the FBI man. He came to me because every CO was examined by the FBI for whether or not he was genuinely, he was sincere.
Huh. So just so I understand here, so you could have had one of those exemptions.
Yeah.
But you chose not to do that because you thought the law itself was unjust.
Exactly.
I didn't understand that. Yes.
Yeah.
Fascinating.
Well, it's in the many statements about me. He was a CO, but no, I could have had any one of three exemptions. I was a draft resistor.
Fascinating.
There was a relatively small group of people around the country who, out of the religious world, said, "We will not sign up and we will not go."
So it's true. True that I suppose it's true that you objected to participation in war, but because you objected to the draft, you took a harder route than you had to.
Exactly. There were people who paid no attention to it, did not go, and they hid. They were underground.
But you didn't hide, and thus you were arrested and tried.
At the time that Jimmy Carter was elected president, his administration guessed that at least 500,000 men went and lived in Canada.
Wow.
And some lived in Europe. At least 500,000. And Jimmy Carter pardoned them over the Vietnam War. And soldiers who weren't going to fight the Vietnam War deserted the Army. One of the reasons Jimmy Carter is such an importantly good man that the nation hasn't recognized is that in 70, he pardoned everybody. He pardoned the soldiers who fled deliberately, and they didn't hide. They didn't just go underground. Many people went underground, took different names, never reported in the 60s and 70s. But a lot of people, thousands of people, left the country and said why they were leaving. they were in steady conversation with their parents and families all the time.
Mm-hmm.
They went to school. They did other things. They were gone.
Mm. So after you're arrested and tried, you're sentenced to, I think, 36 months in federal prison.
That's right. 3 years. I was given a 3-year sentence. And I spent my first night in jail or somewhere in Dayton, Ohio, and ended up at Mill Point, West Virginia, which is a federal prison that is a lumber camp.
Huh.
It has no fences. It has jungle all around it. And no one has ever escaped, at least as back then, 51, 52.
Yeah.
And so I was sent to this honorary lumber camp, and I was clerk and mechanic for the lumber work, for the big cars and trucks and the big lumber trucks.
I think I remember reading you were there with some moonshiners and
mostly moonshiners.
Mostly moonshiners.
Mostly white moonshiners from Tennessee, North Carolina.
Huh. I remember I read in some of your papers, some of your diaries from your year there, 13, 14 months in the prison. And one thing that particularly caught my attention, you were, 23 years old at this time, or quite young?
Yeah, I was 21 or 22.
Okay. So I was struck by, here you are in prison, a prisoner of conscience who could have found a way not to go to prison, but you've gone to prison. And in your diary, there's an element of this sort of deep sense of you're not so sure yet that you've surrendered yourself to God. And this sort of sense of maybe I've failed God, or maybe I haven't found the path yet. And yet at the same time, you have enough confidence to have done what you've done to resist the draft and end up in prison. But do you remember that kind of sense of inner struggle that you had?
Sure.
What was that like for you? Would you talk about that a little bit?
Well, now, you need to understand that in the journey in the Christian Bible of hearing a call from God through Jesus, follow me, that is a highly inside piece of work. And you, at least I shouldn't say you, but I should say that I've never come to the conclusion, well, let me say it another way. I've always recognized my flaws as a human being. Dorothy Lawson may tell you I don't recognize some of them, but I've tried to recognize my flaws and to not pretend about it. So a journey like that, which is a transformative process, from my perspective, simply tries to prevent pretending that you've achieved. You're on a journey, and you continue to be on a journey, and maybe that journey never ends.
Yeah. When you think back to those 13, 14 months in prison from this perspective now, late in your life, what did that experience mean for you in your development as a human being?
in many ways, I lost my fear of persecution. I lost my fear of getting hurt in the struggles. In just any number of ways, I learned the inward confidence of seeking to follow the true and the beautiful and the righteous. But as I put it back then all the time and still continue to put that mantra ahead, I learned the benefits of seeking to follow Jesus. So that at 94, there is a kind of a profound sense of living in the presence of the eternal, and a profound sense of responsibility to, at 94, continue to love and care about life, care about people, and to resist. I more often put it nowadays that I must resist the spiritual forces of wickedness, which in the United States I teach is the inside and the outside of racism, sexism, violence, and plantation capitalism. I've come to the conclusion that these are the four major principalities that the Bible talks of, that I know to be exactly that. They hurt the United States bitterly, and the United States does not recognize it. And because they've been spread by Western civilization, they hurt the world.
So you're paroled and then spend some time in as a missionary in India. And do I remember correctly that?
Let me interrupt a moment,
yes,
because
please.
It's important to understand that as I came in college, being in what is now a United Methodist, in one of its most dynamic periods of history, the 40s, the 50s, into the 60s, I finished college. I come to my senior year, junior year in college, saying to myself, Jim Lawson, you're going to go overseas. You are going to see what it's like to live somewhere else in the world. You're going to test what it means to be human out of another culture. And that becomes a driving force inwardly, so that part of the reason it becomes a driving force, it's doable, because the United Methodist Church after World War II is sending college graduates around the world to teach English in high school. In some cases, they sent men who had graduated in agriculture, farm boys who went to school and their major in agriculture. And there were at least 2 or 3 in my group like that. They sent me as an athlete and coach and campus minister. I was an elder. I was not an elder. I was an ordained deacon in the church by this time. And so they sent me as a campus minister and coach and phys ed teacher to Nagpur. And that was wonderful. At the time of my arrest, I was on my way to a high school in what is Zimbabwe. I had already been accepted by the program. While in prison, our mission board said, "Do you still want to go overseas?" I said, "Yes." They said, "Well, next year, the job in Zimbabwe is gone. Somebody has it. But we have a request for a job as a campus minister, phys ed coach, phys ed teacher in Nagpur, India. And I said, wonderful. That's really, that's my second best.
Yeah. So it's, I presume in India you continue to learn about Gandhi?
Yes. I mean, that's what excited me, because then when I went to India, I had the privilege of meeting a number of the folk in the independence movement. This is 1940, this is 1953 when I arrived there. I had the privilege of meeting Gandhi's right-hand man, Jawaharlal Nehru. So that was one thing. I also had conversations with a number of Christians who were in the movement, in the independence movement. I collected these names from FOR and other people and made it my point to visit with them. I visited a couple of Gandhi's ashrams, especially one outside of Nagpur in Wardha. So India was a terrific choice for me. And I still have on my desk today a book that I continue to review by Gandhi that I bought in India. Why I did not buy more books by Gandhi in India, I don't know. But if I did buy more, I haven't kept them alive.
And then it's there that you hear about the movement beginning with Martin Luther King?
Yes. By the time of 1952, I graduated after prison in one of the roughest times of my life personally was in the fall-winter quarter of September, December, when I was out of prison and I had to finish up my course at BW. Because a couple of the enemies of mine in the faculty were very strong figures on campus and in the faculty, and they resisted the motion by a number of faculty people that the faculty should just grant me my degree because I finished all the courses with A's and B's without trying. But I was not thinking of teaching in university or anything like that. I was strictly aiming at the pastorate and dealing with racism. So by 1952, I was convinced out of my Gandhi studies that that we black folk could have a massive movement of nonviolence that would shake and change the nation. I found out in my reading and all since that I was not the only person who felt that. Jim Farmer in 1942, who organized Congress of Racial Equality, and Bayard Rustin, who was a part of that effort, sit-ins around Northwestern and the University of Chicago in Evanston, both in meeting them and reading some of what they've said over the years, both of them felt a black nonviolent movement could come to pass. Also, Gene Sharp, the major big scholar of nonviolence, got mad at the FOR because he said the FOR should be organizing a major campaign to end segregation and racism. He was mad at A.J. Muste because he said A.J. Muste should be starting it.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, I can't tell you where I read that because I don't make a lot of notes on readings except for sermons and lectures. And
And so how did you discover about what was happening in the States when you're in India?
I subscribed to a number of magazines that got there late, came by ship. But I read Newsweek magazine. I read Progressive magazine. I read Nation magazine. I think I read Christian Century in India. They all got there 6 weeks late, but I followed them. I read I subscribed to the International Herald Tribute. I think it came out of either London or New York, a newspaper. It came. I got it late, but I subscribed to it, and I subscribed to the Nagpur Times, a daily newspaper in Nagpur. So that's how I kept up.
Yeah. Any particular memory of what it was like when you first heard that the movement was starting in the States?
Yes, this is recorded in the book, "The Children" by David Helvesan. Helvesan wrote this book called "The Children,"
right,
in which he follows 8 couples out of the national campaign. Follows them for about 25 or 30 years.
Yeah.
So I told him that story.
Yeah.
I was elated. I hollered and jumped and danced around my desk. I was so. That's one of my days that I will never forget. The story in my next door apartment neighbor was a biologist by the name of Christopher Theophilus, a fine human being, his family, and so Chris came running out of his house and knocked on my door to ask me what in the world was going on. And I told him, I've been expecting this to happen, and when I go back to India, when I go back home, I will be in that. I will be in that struggle.
Yeah. So you come back to the States, and I think you're perhaps back in the Midwest, and then
I go back to Ohio and start my graduate work at Oberlin.
Oh, okay.
Because that was near home.
I see.
Near nephews and nieces, and near my sisters, and I think by that time one brother. So
in time, you're invited to come to the South to begin working in the movement there.
No. I am convinced by 52 that I will work in the South, because that's where the hard-headed segregation is lodged. I don't know how soon I'll get there or when I'm going to get there or what I will do, but that's a part of my calling by that time. They go hand in hand. I returned to Oberlin saying I will stay there only a year so I can be around my parents and my sisters and re-enter into my family. So I go to Oberlin expecting only to be there about a year.
I see. And then so you come to Nashville, and do you rather quickly began training for the sit-in movement?
I was going to drop out of school in May, June, and move to Nashville. I had an appendectomy. That was a fairly dangerous surgery back then. And so I had to postpone and spent the 3rd semester at Oberlin, but dropped out then and landed in Nashville in early January of 1958. My going to Nashville was not because I was recruited. It was because I had committed myself to, as soon as possible, get into the South to work with Martin King and the movement.
Mm.
I did that before King happened.
Mm. Mm.
I was going to go to Atlanta, but when I called AJ and told AJ I'm dropping out of school to go to South, I'm going to move to Atlanta, he said to me, make no plans about the South until we have talked again, until I called you back. So when he calls me back, I think it was somewhere between October and November, he said, why don't you become secretary of FOR for our southern region? And of course, I'm self-financing myself. Right. So I know that's God's will.
Yes.
I know that's providential that I can move south with the job.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
So the appendectomy delayed me. So it's shortly after New Year's that I am in Nashville. And you ask, when do I begin that? Well, in Nashville, there is Helen Robinson, Johnetta Hayes, C.T. Vivian, Andrew White, Kelly Miller Smith, probably a number of others, but they have all organized a Nashville Christian Leadership Conference as an affiliate of SCLC. They immediately put me on the executive committee for nonviolent action and education. So I land in a place where I have all kinds of friends.
Yeah. Providential indeed.
Yeah,
seems.
right from the day one. All people who love what Montgomery bus boycott and wanted to do it in Nashville.
Yes.
See, so
remarkable. So I have.
But my first big operation as Southern Secretary was in Little Rock.
Huh. I didn't know that.
Yeah. It's left out of the story.
Yeah. So what happened in Little Rock?
Glenn Smiley is our field director. He meets me in Nashville. He has arranged an apartment for me, and he has arranged an early schedule. So January and February, I'm traveling with Glenn and his wife at places where they have worked, where he has worked, where there are FOR members, where there is a need for nonviolent education and counseling. So the first place we go to is Little Rock. My first day in Little Rock, I meet all 9 of the Little Rock students in the living room of Daisy Bates, who was the chairman of the NAACP state chapter. Glenn and I are together. We sit with those 9 students, which have been arranged by local people. FOR members at the School of Medicine arranged it. And I asked them right off, what is going on? What are you experiencing? They are experiencing the full assault of the governor, the White Citizens Council, and approximately 100 white students, the names that the NAACP has locally. They've kept the name. All the people who did harassment, they named them and reported it to the Southern Court. So I asked them, what are your experience? They tell us at length. I asked them, how are you handling it? They said the lawyers and the NAACP and our parents tell us we may not fight back. And there is some anger in me that happens, that's what's going on. And I then eat all my anger up inside, and I say to them, what they actually mean is, you are not to fight back like you are being attacked. You are not to hate as your enemies in the school and the governor hates you. I said, you are to fight back with character. And then Glenn and I introduced them to nonviolence. And they're all baptized people. So we can use Jesus as the model. And one of the very exciting stories that came out of LA for me was, I asked them what was the worst thing happening to them. And a couple of the girls immediately popped up and saying, the bombing. And I said, well, what is that? They said, well, almost always a boy will take a piece of silver or a piece of white paper, and they will wrap it in a marble or a small stone, and then they will hurl that at us in class. And it really hurts when it hits. So I said, well, what can you do about bombing? You can't stop them from bombing you, and you can't go after them for bombing. You know that. So what are some of the possibilities? And so we walked around that bombing. It was in that first week, and I think it was Carlotta Walls, but I'm not sure about who it was. One of the 9, who said that when she went to her 8 o'clock class the next morning, as she entered the room, a bomb went past her head, missing her, hit the wall, and fell to the floor. And she said that she looked at it. She was very aware where it came from, the boy, towards the back of the room. And she thought about it. And she said, with my knees trembling, I stooped down, I pick it up. And I walk back to the boy who threw it, and I put it on his desk and stared at him and smiled at him. She said he turned all kinds of colors.
Wow.
Then she said, the next morning, he was at the door when she entered, and he said, good morning, Carlotta. And the FBI, the NAACP kept a record of every student or teacher who seemed to be an harasser or a part of the group fighting to make them leave. And she said, we took his name off the list because he never again harassed any of us.
Huh. What a beautiful story. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
So when I think about the Nashville sit-in movement, I'm always immediately drawn in my memories to seeing videos of you conducting workshops there in Nashville,
Yeah.
and you would have
Yeah.
them practice kind of at the
I
sit-ins.
did role playing.
Yeah, would you just
we
describe
called
kind
it
of the
role play.
workshops? Describe the workshops that you did.
Well, many of the books get it wrong. I'm traveling for F4 in 1958. SCLC's anxious, and Martin King are anxious about another Montgomery campaign in whatever field. There was one in Tallahassee, a bus boycott that was well done. So, but people were asking the question, what's next? I traveled for 8 months. I decided that whatever is next, I would have to do it in Nashville where I lived. So Kelly Miller Smith and I talked, and we agreed that the next executive committee meeting of National Leadership Council, we would put it before the executive committee. The executive committee unanimously said, let's organize it in Nashville. And they named me as the organizer. And we agreed in the fall, that was October, November, fall, then that we would officially begin the organization in January of 59. So we started Saturday morning meetings. And in the first 3 months, I had the group, 30 to 60 people came to every Saturday morning for 2 hours. We wrestled with the question, what are the problems for Black people in Nashville? So it was applied to Nashville. Various people came. I had made it clear that what we're doing is we're doing our focus so that we could locate the issue that we wanted to work on. We actually had delegations come to us from the community. One of the first delegations of people who came to that Saturday morning meeting said, you should work on the schools. I did not know what the focus ought to be, and I didn't try to know. I was going to accept the process that I chose, focus. In 3 months, we had done a laundry list, and I look back upon that and ask myself, why did you not have someone keep notes so those minutes might have been available? But I didn't. Anyway, we did for 3 months a laundry list of everything that we thought represented the plight of the Black communities of Nashville. And then we spent 3 months, April, May, June, that's it. January, February, March, we concentrated on the first task of focus. Then April, May, June, we concentrated on deciding what from that laundry list we would do. And to my own great surprise, because I'll never forget my feelings about it, the group decided we will desegregate downtown Nashville.
Mm.
And it was the women who dominated and made that the issue.
Huh.
And their reasoning was, it's the major shopping district, and it is very hurtful to shop for our families, to shop for groceries, because the major stores were downtown, the supermarkets. And it is painful. And some women reported to us in those meetings, I don't shop in Nashville. I make my shopping list and I go to New York. I go to Boston. I go to Cincinnati. I go to Cleveland to do my shopping.
Wow.
For major items.
Yeah.
I shop there where I'm treated differently. I can try on a hat. I can try on a dress. If I need a pair of shoes for my child, they can try the shoes on.
Yeah.
None of which you could do under segregation.
So when you began to send out groups of students to do the sit-in, I wondered what sorts of levels of anxiety are you dealing with personally as you are watching these young people that you've trained go out into these hostile situations?
I think the major anxiety they had was, will it work? They knew about the possibility they would be hit, could get hurt. But for them, going after the task of Nashville is the first time any major group of any kind in the South makes the agenda not an anti-discrimination bill, a court case, but a case of publicly desegregating. That's in none of the books that I have read. But one of the big gains of the nation was we showed the nation that democracy can make changes without firing a shot, without killing anybody, without beating up on anybody. Because the great task from Nashville is that we started the public desegregation of the nation. And we did it without hating anybody.
Yeah. Yes.
We bombed no store. We killed no police officer. We chased no white boy down the street. And that's almost not written anywhere. I've not seen it anywhere.
So then subsequent, there's lots we'll want to have.
Well, let me do the timeline.
Yeah.
I made the timeline. January to March, we did a focus on an analysis of all the problems. March to June, we selected the target. I set a timeline then that we would recruit people for workshops beginning in September. I did not set a timeline for how long those workshops would last, but that I would do a historic review of nonviolence, of Gandhi, of King, of the Congress of Racial Equality, on many experiences of nonviolence in Europe and the United States. That I would do a systematic presentation of Jesus and the Exodus and in other places in the Old Testament and as well of nonviolent philosophy, spirituality.
And so how many months did you take doing that survey?
We started in September, I'm pretty sure, at the beginning of school, of colleges, rather. And we stopped only in December, before Christmas.
This is an extensive commitment to education before you even began to act.
That's right. And what is in none of the books is that I did not train people. I prepared people. Either John Lewis or Bernard Lafayette in their writings say that what happened was that John Lewis writes in his Walking with the Wind that basically I changed his entire life. I gave him a philosophy around which, a Christian philosophy around which to organize his life and work. And I define preparation and training differently. Preparation is the work of teaching people about nonviolent struggle, doing role playing, designing the action that you're going to do. The day you start the first demonstration, you do training before every demonstration. You tell them what we are going to do and how we're going to do it. You give people as much information about the sit-in that you're going to take and your attitude, the discipline we're going to follow.
And did you all require or request that those who were participating in the various sit-ins or other actions have gone through that extensive preparation period?
No. I offered the group an outline of a little discipline. John Lewis says that he's the one who mimeographed him. He may have, but I offered it to the Central Committee, and the Central Committee approved it. And that's what we did.
I see.
I think the guys at ABC might have done making the copies of it. I'm not sure they only were making copies of it, but we tried to make a copy of that available to every person who went downtown to shit in.
And was that the kind of the
little
rules?
Sheet that's in some of the stuff.
Yeah, and that's kind of the rules that were expected.
Yeah,
of
this is
everyone.
we expect you to do these things.
Yes, they have that posted in the Civil Rights Room at the Nashville Public
Then
Library.
I revised it. I revised it for Birmingham campaign in 1963. King liked that idea, so we revised it and SCLC then used it elsewhere.
I see. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So it became a model for tactic.
Yeah.
You don't get everybody into the meetings so that you can give them the history of the Montgomery bus boycott and why it was so powerful.
Yeah.
So you try, nevertheless, that they will follow a discipline of the movement.
Yeah.
They will not act on their own. They will act according to what we're trying to achieve.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that was a major kind of thing that I brought to the campaigns.
So you moved to Memphis in what year? You moved to Memphis in what year?
1962.
Okay. And then you are organizing the sanitation workers action in 1968?
I am helping the sanitation workers after they go on strike. They go on strike in February of '68. And Centenary United Methodist Church and I are supporting them from day one. They have no strike fund. So we began the process of raising a special offering every week that we put into the strike fund for the first month or so, maybe. But the union comes in and sends the strike fund major donation from the international funds.
I see. Yeah.
But initially, congregations and preachers helped and community raised money.
Yeah.
For them.
And then
so the union is organized by T.O. Jones, who is the sanitation worker who 6 years earlier than the strike quits work, but instead begins to be the organizer of the union.
Oh, okay.
And gives his time to organizing. He decides not to work as a sanitation, but to work as a union organizer.
What leads to Dr. King coming to Memphis during that time?
The Labor Committee of the City Council declares that it will negotiate and do a letter of recognition to the union with a dues write-off in the letter. They meet with us at City Hall. They agree they're going to do it. We go to City Hall that next day, Thursday. They are to then officially agree to the letter of agreement on Thursday. As I remember, we hear the letter read. We meet with them at the convention center. They call for a motion and they agree that the letter will be referred to the mayor for his signature, that the city council cannot properly do it, that the mayor has to sign it anyway. So that's their rationale. But of course, the mayor is the one who says, you can't administer this. I'm the mayor. I mean, I'm not sure what all went on, but that's what happened. So when we go Thursday morning to the city convention center, knowing that the strike is now going to end, they announce what has happened. They refer the letter to the mayor. They adjourn the meeting, and they shut off all the power in the convention center. Well, of course, they have made a promise, and the 700 or 800 or 1,000 men with their families, in some cases, begin to shout and yell, scream. And we manage to, Jerry Worth is there, Bill Lucy is there, T.O. Jones is there. We manage to get order in from the stage. I call Frank Holloman, who is the new ex-FBI man who is the commissioner of fire and police, and say to him, we're going to peacefully walk down the main street to Mason Temple for a community meeting with the union. He agrees. And Jerry Worth and I and Ralph Jackson, T.O. Jones have been able to talk this out on the stage, because I call him from the stage. And the net result is then we bring the 800 or so public works employees out on the intersection and proceed to line them up to march on one side of, is it Main Street or Popular Street? I don't remember which it is, to Mason Temple. We have to go straight through town from this convention center. I am in front of one of the major department stores. The march is going well. It is peaceful. Police cars roll out of the side streets. Each car has 4 white officers in it. They drive up right next to the march, to the people, to the workers, and proceed up and down the march to have police cars loaded with 4 white officers. About 5 or 6 police cars back, that car is apparently designated to be the antagonist, because that car keeps turning in on the police, on the workers. I watch it because I keep turning around to see what they're doing, you see. So I see this incident. One time I run back and I say to the police officers, "Stop it. You all are trying to cause problems." And I watch them. They are, later on, some of the folks say that they had a certain group of workers that they wanted to do violence against because they didn't like the workers, the way the workers walked or the way the workers talked. I don't know if that's true or not. But anyway, before we know it, that car has done its job. Workers put their hands in the car. The white officers pour out of the cars instantly with cans of mace, and they mace us all. Some people, like myself, got more macing than others, but some workers got it. Some preachers got it. I had glasses on, so my macing was not as bad as they hoped, although I got it in my ears and a little rolled into my eyes. But otherwise, I did not lose the use of my eyes. As that happened, I shouted out, "Let us go to Mason Temple anyway, and we'll still have our meeting." So, and word got out, and as we arrived there, I walked the whole distance with a escort of police officers, one of whom walked right in front of me and kept, or on the side of me, and kept trying to show how mad he was at me. He didn't strike me, but he kept looking at me as though he wanted to do it. But so, and he escorted me all the way down to the temple.
An angry escort.
Angry the entire time. I don't know what he thought, but anyway, it was pretty bad. And so there at Mason Temple, we united, and people were pouring in from all over the city. And I don't remember who presided. One of the pastors presided. It might have been Ralph Jackson, might have been Henry Starks. We had such strong, good men that it was just, we had many choices. And anyway, someone presided. I sat in the audience. The group decided, number one, the community was going to back the strike fully. They named several of us to a strategy committee. That's what happened then. That could have been as early as February 23rd, a Thursday, as I recall. Later on, I had to leave the meeting because I had other chores. Later on, Harold Middlebrooks, one of our fine pastors just outside the city, called me to say that the meeting told me to call you and tell you that you ought to be chairperson and call the meeting strategy. I think they called it a strategy committee. And you're to call the meeting together and make the plans and do the work. So that's how that organized.
So then you're fairly directly involved in asking Dr. King to come to Memphis?
No, I'm following a movement's pattern. In the King movement, we did... In the King movement, in the SCLC movement, we did many, many desegregations of the cities of the South. Albany, Georgia was 1962. St. Augustine, Florida was 1964. Birmingham was 63. We did major campaigns. Danville, Virginia. I'm trying to remember if we, oh boy, I moved this.
It's okay.
I'm trying to remember Albany, Birmingham, St. Augustine, Danville, Virginia. I don't remember, but we did campaigns that modeled after the Nashville campaign, which had desegregated downtown, see? Give me the question again.
How Dr. King ended up coming to Memphis.
Okay. The SCLC movements did these many cities. Sekou Franklin says that he now has a list of over 200 cities that followed Nashville in his research and work. So the pattern was that we start the movement, immediately have mass meetings. SCL staff would go wherever they had to go for that campaign. I was called in. I was a counselor. In Selma to Montgomery. I never went to Selma, but at least 10 of my people from Nashville were staff for Selma. I never went. Diane Nash called me from Selma, and I think Bernard, I can't remember who all called me from Selma to tell me what was going on, to ask for counsel in their planning. So Selma was a Lawson campaign, if I wanted to call it that. Anyway, so the point I'm making is that the SCLC movement was a movement of campaigns in cities modeled after Nashville.
Yeah.
So in any number of these, I went in as a staff person, volunteer staff person, and then other people from Nashville will also come in.
Yeah.
Albany, Georgia was 1962. Albany, Georgia happened directly because of Nashville. In the Freedom Ride, we had a lot of Nashville people in the Parchment jail. And as we got arrested in Jackson, Mississippi, one of the things I insisted that we must do, that in jail had to become a school of nonviolence. We had to share our nonviolent understandings with each other. We had to share what we were doing in our local, where we came from, the campus we came from. That had to be the agenda. Sharing, because we didn't have the books. There were no books anyway. So that's why Parchment became the university for us. And for all the people that came in, it was to be the place where we learned. I was in the first group of people arrested, along with Jim Farmer, John Lewis, Bernard Lee, Lafayette, C.T. Vivian. I can't remember everyone. I was in the first group arrested in Jackson. So we turned the city jail, then the county jail, and then Parchment into a part of our resistance.
Yeah.
And that was by deliberate intention.
Right.
We're going into jail. You're going to talk about nonviolence. You're going to you're going to talk about how you improve your own life in the movement, and then how the movement itself in your locality is going to improve.
Fascinating. Yeah. What do you, when you think back to Dr. King's assassination there in Memphis, what are memories that stand out for you in that 24-hour period?
In that 24-hour period?
Yes, sir.
April the 4th, 1968. I have to tell you that my friend Martin and I were very much like each other. We had read the same books at Morehouse, Baldwin Wallace, and Boston. We had some of the same people teach us at Boston when I finished up at Boston. We were third-generation pastors. Martin and I simply clicked. And part of the reason we clicked is that by 1952, I knew we were going to have a movement. I did not know who was going to emerge, but I saw as whoever was going to emerge was going to be my Moses, and that's the word I used to myself in India and before and after. People, I'm doing a memoir. I do not know how many times King and I conferred by phone. I do not know how many times King and I took walks at Penn Center or in Georgia, at our staff retreats, our board retreats, when he and I would take walks for the purpose of talking. And his, in large measure, sharing with me where he thought things were and wanting me to bounce against it, so that he could feel that he was moving in the right direction. Does that answer that question? I can't tell you how often that happened.
Yeah.
So when the sanitation strike began, and I canceled going to see him in Miami, where he had called and wanted me to do some nonviolent lectures for preachers he had brought in to try to help them understand nonviolent struggle. And I told him that we were going to run the I canceled and told him that we're going to run the strike like a nonviolent movement, and that he would be getting word from me because I would want him to come into a mass meeting. On that April the 3rd, no, we were in court April the 4th. So I was somewhat upset because I had to be a witness in the case against SCLC being in Memphis. And then that morning, and Martin insisted that Andrew Young and I, who were to be the witnesses in the federal court, would come by before we went to court. And we talked in that morning. And when I asked for the court to let me go, it was after lunch, around 2:00 or so. I then went back to where King was at the motel and visited with him about the movement until maybe 5:00, and then went to the strike office to see what things I had to do for the next steps. Then landed at home around 6:00 because Dorothy and I had a discipline that I would always be home at 6:00 no matter what was going on. I would be home and we would have supper on the table with, by that time, 3 sons. And so a little before 6, I was walking into the kitchen greeting her, and then heard from an alcove the TV interrupted by an announcement that King had been shot at the Lorraine Motel. So that tells you my history, a piece of it that day. But I spent probably close to 4 hours with King at the motel before the court opened, and then spent probably close to the same amount of time or more with King after I left court.
In your papers, there were, I don't know how many, telegrams from all over the country, the world, to you, expressing solidarity with you and sympathy to you. And there was letters expressing grief, some expressing shame. There was one telegram from the Lawyers Constitutional Defense Committee of the ACLU that they had sent identical wires to the White House, SCLC, Andrew Young, and to you. You had a copy of it. And I was struck by the language of pain and anger in this telegram particularly. It said, "His death leaves us despairing, all but paralyzed with anger and bitterness at a society that destroys its best sons." And I wonder, for you being such good friends, did you have to process despair, or what was your own experience of anger or grief like during that time?
All right. You have to understand that I am a man of the Spirit. I'm a man of the Scriptures. I'm a man who tries to follow Jesus. So that while I experience grief, I'm not sure I very rarely ever have experienced despair. I've had more a sense of despair even today from the 60s because my country assassinated 5 of its finest young men: a president, a senator, Malcolm X, Medgar Evers, and Martin King. That is the great issue, because forces of spiritual wickedness in the United States killed, assassinated people in order to keep the country from doing what the country should have done.
Yeah.
Those forces are still alive.
Yeah.
So I do not just have grief for Martin. I continue to grieve because the major handicap of the assassinations of the 60s, very simple from my point of view. Number one, those assassinations killed the process of transformation that meant that a Malcolm X was about to join with King. And secondly, those assassinations stopped the emergence of a movement that would have transformed the United States. It did some transformation anyway, but didn't do all that could have done and would have done.
Yeah. So as we get close to finishing up, I wonder if you could share a little bit about what sorts of disciplines, to use a word you used earlier, have continued to help you stay the course. What's it look like for you as far as prayer or journaling or whatever it is what is it for you that has kind of helped you try to practice a vision of life that you have felt called to ever since you were that 4-year-old?
Well, the scriptures have been my primary book for the inward life. And Jesus of Nazareth has been my primary figure. And the Exodus, first chapter of the book of Exodus, the first written account we have of civil disobedience, the first written account that we have of what was probably a essentially nonviolent movement of the escape of slaves from Egypt to the Promised Land are two of the several places that I know about that have informed me over the years. And then, of course, my primary mantra is still follow Jesus. And in my reflection and prayers and Bible reading and practice of the presence that goes on now, there is a centrality to the role of the Spirit of Jesus as the highest possible form of religion that the human race knows anything about. And then there is a quiet in-house confidence in the work I have done. What people who call me a civil rights worker do not know is that I, at a very early age, knew I was to be a pastor. As early as junior high school, the 7th grade, I realized I was on my way towards being a pastor. In high school, I was convinced I would be a pastor. So it's as a pastor I have worked, and many people are not aware of the fact that I pastored 3 congregations, and they give me today quiet joy in how I was able to live, what I was able to do, how I was able to participate in the lives of all kinds of people from that position of a pastor.
We've been talking to Reverend James Lawson here at Holman United Methodist Church, which he served for many years in the parlor. And Reverend Lawson, we thank you for your generosity with your time, and we thank you for the beautiful example of your life and for your sharing with us today.
Well, thank you very much for wanting to do this, and I'm pleased I'm able to do it.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Yeah, very appreciative.
Mm-hmm. Good. Is that 90 minutes?
A bit more.
Okay.
Yeah.
John Lawson should be knocking on the door then.
You live close by?
We are about 10 minutes away.
Yeah. Very good. Is your health still good and your wife's health still good?
Yes, we're both wrestling now with chronic heart disease. Dorothy's is worse than mine, but I'm recovering from having taken on a pacemaker as of December the 9th. I have about I said my convalescence is going to be through February, so I'm consider myself still convalescing, and I have to remember that because Saturday morning, yesterday morning, I get up. I'm feeling fine. It's a beautiful day. The sun is beautiful in our upstairs in our bedroom window. I get on the stationary bike. I cycle for 20 minutes. I go in my dressing room and lift 5-pound weights with my arms and hands until they get tired. I walk downstairs into the kitchen and dining room to eat. And I have one of my spells where I can...
Oh, no.
Yeah. Now that's stupidity.
Yeah.
There was no way in the world I was supposed to be doing that Saturday or today.
Yeah.
I'm not supposed to have that kind of a workout.
Yes.
I can walk and all, and I can do light exercises, but I'm not supposed to be doing
yes.
weights.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you felt up to coming over to be with us today.
Yeah.
So yeah. Oh, I was going to ask you also. What are some of your favorite hymns?
My favorite hymn,
or several of them?
Yeah, I can do several better than one.
Yeah.
A hymn that I use in prayer all the time is God of grace and God of glory.
Mm-hmm.
Grant us wisdom, grant us courage for the living, facing of this hour, for the facing of this hour. I use that in my reflections and meditations. I use We Shall Overcome.
Mm.
I use Lift Every Voice and Sing. I use Oh Love That Will Not Let Me Go, a Wesleyan hymn.
Right.
We're Marching to Zion, Steal Away to Jesus.
How beautiful. Those are all lovely.
Yeah. Go Tell It, Go Down Moses. I use it. Steal Away to Jesus is a fight song.
Right.
It's not a piety song.
Yeah.
It was a song sung at the early part of the 19th century. I know from my reading, it was sung by Nat Turner to announce that we are having a meeting in the jungle where the white man can't see us. It was used by the grandfather of Roland Hayes in Southwest Georgia. Roland Hayes was the first great black musician with reputation out of Europe. He had no reputation in the United States. But he sang opera and concerts all over Europe where he had the fame.
Yeah. Would you be willing to sing a verse of God of Grace and God of Glory?
I don't know if I can remember a whole verse.
Okay.
I know some of the lines in different places.
Yeah.
Let me see. King loved to sing, incidentally.
He loved to what?
Sing. People don't know that about him. Oh, yeah, we had...
Did y'all sing together?
Oh, yeah, we had singing sessions all the time in staff meetings, board meetings, staff retreats.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, we had... People broke out in song. That was a major thing. Oh, yeah. All kinds of hymns. Which side are you on, boys?
Yeah.
The spiritual. Which side are you on? That was James Bevel. He liked that especially.
Yeah, I can imagine he would.
Yeah.
I'm seeing Martin Sheen on Saturday and John Deere on Tuesday, but Martin Sheen especially wanted me to give you his greetings.
Oh, Martin Sheen, you've seen Martin?
Yes, sir. And he sends his love to you. And
thank you.
He just lit up on the phone when I told him I was
Give him my very best when you see him.
I will.
Tell him we ought to probably get together, get her out here.
I'll tell him.
Even though we don't, we've been in jail together.
I heard that y'all had been in jail together. He spoke of that very fondly, as a matter of fact.
Yeah, and we had a major session on what we were doing on Christian faith and what was expected of us as Christians in federal holding pen. That was the 1980s, I think. We had hundreds of us got arrested in the killing of the Jesuits in El Salvador.
El Salvador.
Yeah. Uh-huh. Hundreds of us got arrested in L.A. We had hundreds and hundreds of people arrested as we protested that and the government policy. And that's one of the places where he and I found ourselves next to each other.
Yeah.
And visited and talked at length.
Yeah.
Good man. Give him my very, very best.
I will indeed.
Tell him his fond memory.
Yes. Yeah. And they've also done a beautiful job taking care of your papers at Vanderbilt. I was very impressed with how arranged, how well arranged it is, and they've tried to honor you well in that regard.
I probably ought to send them more papers. I've not tried to deliberately collect, and I've lost a lot of papers. But
well, it was a rich collection of resources there. Shall I check to see if your son is here?
Well, that's very good.
Yeah.
I should tell you one other thing that is not known.
Okay.
Although it will be in my memoir.
Let me put this a little closer to you then.
The popular theme is that King was despairing and so tired he was ready to die. That's the theme of his last year. That's one of the themes. He may have been exhausted in various ways. His schedule was incredible. But all through the last year of his life, King and I were talking by phone. We did a lot of talking by phone. The books don't seem to know that I, for one, constantly told him not to talk out about Vietnam or U.S. foreign policy all through the 60s, and told him in the 60s, because that was one of the items we wanted to talk about, told him he could not speak up about it until the spirit within him was so overwhelming that he could no longer keep quiet. And the books seem to be not aware of the fact that what he did in the early 60s, he had staff people go to Vietnam affairs. He had Coretta go and speak. I don't think I've seen that in a single book. Prior to 67, his own major speeches, that's what he did. The books are unaware that Martin King started a relationship with Thich Quoc Han in 1965. And he started the relationship with me, with Thich Quoc Han. Martin King was invited by the International and National Fellowship of Reconciliation to join an international team of clergy and rabbis who would go and visit Cambodia, Hanoi, and Saigon. And he informed the International FR that he could not, because of the movement, go on such a trip. But he asked the International then to send me instead, to take me to represent him. They don't know all that.
Mm-hmm.
So that in May, I'm sitting the Pepperdine family house was the first house Holman people who were organizing in 45, 47. It was the first piece of property. Some of them put their homes up for mortgages in order to make a down payment on the Pepperdine family mansion that was in that direction where the sanctuary is, just this side of the sanctuary. And they mortgaged. It's just a really wonderful story how this congregation got started. Anyway, so I get the call from Martin. I'm sitting in the Pepperdine office, my office at the top of the second floor of the Pepperdine family home, and King calls me directly and says, Jim, you know, I cannot identify at this stage, I cannot now identify with anti-Vietnam War, as we have talked about. And I said, yes, I know that. And so anyway, had a long discussion about it, where we were reinforcing our strategy. And then he told me about the trip to Southeast Asia and said, I've asked them to take you instead of me. And he asked me also to personally meet Thich Nhat Hanh, who was 22.
Oh, wow.
And was in the Buddhist church opposition to U.S. policy. Major campaign going on in Vietnam, where Buddhist monks burned themselves, immolated themselves. And Thich Nhat Hanh was one of the spokespeople. So, yeah, that happened in 1965.
So you went on that trip then?
Oh, yeah.
Huh.
Oh, yeah.
And then it was 1 year prior to his death that he made the famous Riverside speech, right? So he finally starts talking about Vietnam and militarism in 1967? Is that kind of when all that begins?
No. His criticism of foreign policy and the military is continuous through the 50s and 60s.
Okay.
He is a critic in board meetings, in staff meetings, in campaigns. He's a constant critic. The nation doesn't know how much, because he's dismissed as a civil rights person. And that's his only field. He is ignored as a theologian, as a prophet, because he's black. As a man who's prepared himself in the best way that we Americans know how to prepare oneself for any kind of serious message in the world. So he's critical all along the way. And I'm one of those. His committee in New York his names are slipping me. Bard Rustin is in that group. A.J. Musty's in that group. Clarence Jones is in that group. And there's a very famous Jewish lawyer who becomes a major friend who's in that group. Harry Belafonte is in that group. I'm not sure how many others are in that group. I don't know if I've ever seen a list of that group anywhere.
Yeah, I don't know of it.
Yeah, huh?
I do not know of that group.
Oh, yes. See, that's the civil rights movement and do not know of how a movement organizes.
Yeah.
In December of 1955, the 5th is the first day of the boycott. Al Hassler is now the director of FOR. Bayard Rustin, A.J. Musty, and others are all in New York with FOR people and Friends people. And I think it's A.J. or Al Hassler who decides that we need to send Bayard Rustin to Montgomery to see what's going on. This is the end of January 1955, 56. This is the end of, the bus boycott.
Okay, yeah.
It's 381 days into 56. So this is January of 55. No, that's not right. Okay, Jim Lawson, you're getting this mixed up. First day of the strike is December 5th, 1955. That's right. And New York people support it, and they send Bayard Rustin about the last week of January 1956.
Okay.
And Bayard is there to go see how the boycott can be appointed, how the boycott can be supported, rather. A black publisher of Atlanta newspaper says that if King and the boycott do not get rid of Bayard Rustin, he's going to expose Byron as a homosexual. Byron has had a couple of arrests for his gayness.
Who threatens with that?
The publisher of the Atlanta, it was a black newspaper in Atlanta. I don't remember what paper it was. Or the name of the publisher. But that publisher lets King and others know in Montgomery, Rustin needs to get out of there. You must get rid of him. He had been a communist. That was another issue. But his gayness and his communism, he was not a member of the Communist Party at that time. He had quit. He had left. But they said, if he doesn't leave, we're going to expose him and expose you. That's one of the places where the rumor about King and Bayard Rustin being gay partners got. I don't know if you know that.
No.
It did not last very long, as I recall, and had no depth to it by people who knew it. So,
was it somewhat widely suspected that the FBI was spying on King as much as they were?
Not at that time.
Okay.
I do not know when they tapped his phones, okay? I never read Garrow's book, The FBI and Martin Luther King Jr. That book may tell you that.
Okay.
All I know is that when Martin King comes home from the Nobel Peace Prize in December of 1964, that's when they introduce the eyeball-to-eyeball squad, and they tap all his phones. They tap his hotel rooms. They follow him sometime on the same plane everywhere he went. The eyeball-to-eyeball surveillance begins then. And if you want to find that, that's in the Church Committee's report on intelligence.
Oh, okay.
it's a 7-volume paperback, and one volume is entirely related to the surveillance of King, the tapping of the phone calls. And I read the volume because UCLA Library had it when I got here in '74. So I made it a point to read it.
Did the night of his last speech, the descriptions I've read of that sound like that was just a very emotional night. Just was there like a thunderstorm going on, or?
Yes, and many stories of that last night are wrong. Martin King insisted that I would drive him to Mason Temple from the hotel room on the night of April the 3rd. It started storming somewhere in the mid or early afternoon, and it was a Memphis Midwest Southern storm.
Springtime thunderstorm.
Sheets of water that just poured for 3 or 4 hours across the meeting time of the mass meeting. And I had agreed to pick up Martin and Ralph sometime before 7, but I spent a good hour and a half in their room visiting before we would go. And Martin then pled with Ralph and me because he was started saying, there'll be nobody there. And I kept saying, Martin, we will be there. So finally, Ralph Abernathy and I agreed that we would go on to Mason Temple, and that if the crowd was there, one of us would call King back and tell him, get over here. They're looking for you. So that's what's happened. The stories about that evening are all I don't know where they came from. But those stories are crazy.
Yeah.
I don't remember who finally brought King over, but I think it was Ralph who finally called King and said, no, there's a big crowd here. One of the very important things about Memphis that King loved was that in Memphis, we had the Mason Temple of the Church of God in Christ, which was an 8,000-seat auditorium.
It's humongous. I've been there.
Yeah. And then it has these wide aisles. And the first night he came, that place was packed from shoulder to shoulder, and there was, I guesstimated that we had 25,000 people on that site. In the parking lot, they had to put up speakers around the building, in the parking lot. And then inside was bumper to bumper people. Every aisle was packed with people standing up.
Wow.
One of the most astonishing experiences I ever had in my life of a probably 10 to 12,000 people in the place, and then probably another 10, close to 10,000 people or more outside in the parking lot with speakers around.
Huh. So this was not the night of his last speech.
No.
This was previously.
This was March 17th.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Because he actually had preached at Holman Church Sunday morning.
Here.
Yeah.
Huh.
He was in L.A. preaching, raising money, because Tom Kilgore at Second Baptist Church was one of the family's major friends from way back, Morehouse days. King was out there raising money, and when I had called him earlier saying, we want you for a mass meeting, but you're not going to be the first speaker, I told him, I said, because we had a unity movement going on. NAACP locally was deeply in it. I knew that if King came in and speak first, the NAACP National would not come in. We wanted the AFL-CIO to come in. We wanted Roy Wilkins to come in. I didn't have the strategy committee voted to have them come in. The first meeting we had on that Monday, and somehow we screwed up because Roy Wilkins and Bayard Rustin came in the same day, which I did not want. I wanted Bayard separately, but wanted Roy Wilkins to come first. And then the next week, Bayard, then the next week, King. And again, strategic thinking and planning, not junk.
Yeah.
Anyway, the treasurer of the NAACP was a staunch supporter of the strike. Jesse called Roy Wilkins. Jerry Worth or somebody for him called Bayard. I called King. The talk in the books is that King was hesitant. Martin King was never hesitant when it came to coming to something for me that I talked about. I was never hesitant when he said, Jim, I need you to come here. I was a volunteer staff person for SCLC.
Oh, okay.
From 1960, the sit-in campaign was 60, from 1960 till his death. Wherever King wanted me to go, I went.
So this was you said that it was the Pepperdine family that was here? Where is that house still standing?
No. The Pepperdine family has been replaced partially by this building.
Oh, okay.
That side of the building is where the Pepperdine lot was.
I see. And then was the original Pepperdine campus around here?
Yes, it was, but it was down on 80th Street.
80th, okay.
80th in Vermont.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, that's now a church campus.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
But that's where the Pepperdine School began.
Okay, yeah. Well, thank you so much. I'm really super grateful for your time and honored to get to be with you this afternoon.
Well, thank you.
Our thanks to all the stellar team that makes this show possible: Christy Bragg, Jacob Lewis, Sophie Byard, Tom Anderson, Kate Hayes, Mary Evelyn Brown, Carriot Harmon, Jason Sheasley, Ellis Osborne, and Tim Lauer. Thanks for listening, and let's keep exploring what it means to live a good life together. No Small Endeavor is a production of PRX, Tokens Media LLC, and
Great Feeling Studios.
From PRX.